Deep beneath the Antarctic ice, physicists have spent decades building sensors to catch a single ghost particle that barely exists. It's a pursuit defined by immense patience and almost zero consequence for the average person. But something striking happens when that same technical obsession moves from the subatomic lab to the server farm. Writing just yesterday, Simon Frantz tracks the quiet engineering of neutrino traps, while Bryan Walsh examines why AI companies feel entitled to reorder daily life without asking first. There's a real puzzle in how the same aesthetic thrill that drives a scientist to chase a flicker of light also fuels the rush toward technologies that could actually break the world. Wolfgang Pauli once worried he'd done a terrible thing by proposing a particle that could never be found. In an article published yesterday, Simon Frantz follows the decades of engineering required to prove him wrong. What's worth listening for is the physical scale of the patience required, like the 25 years spent counting radioactive argon atoms inside a tank of cleaning fluid buried deep in a South Dakota mine. Simon Frantz leaves the listener in the quiet of a South Dakota mine, staring at 400,000 liters of cleaning fluid. There's a specific kind of romance in that image. The idea of spending 25 years just to prove a ghost exists. It suggests that the terrible thing Wolfgang Pauli did by postulating an undetectable particle was actually a gift to science, giving physicists a puzzle beautiful enough to justify decades of patient waiting. But notice how that same aesthetic pull, what J. Robert Oppenheimer called the technically sweet, undergoes a mutation when the object isn't a subatomic particle, but a world-altering algorithm. Bryan Walsh picks up this thread by looking at the people building AI today. Where the neutrino hunters were content to wait for nature to reveal itself, the figures in Walsh's piece are forcing a new reality into existence before the public can even weigh in. The interesting thing is that both pieces describe a form of surrender to a beautiful idea. In Frantz's account, the surrender leads to massive, silent engineering feats that harm no one. In Walsh's, that same moral helplessness becomes a justification for building first and asking questions later. Read alongside Frantz, the AI labs Walsh describes look less like pioneers and more like people caught in the same sweetness that built the bomb, only now the laboratory is the entire world.
In 1954, years after he led the project that created the atomic bomb, physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer was called to testify before the Atomic Energy Commission, the AEC. The ostensible subject of the hearings was Oppenheimer's position on the hydrogen bomb, a far more destructive version of the atomic bomb that the U.S. had developed and first tested 2 years earlier. Who gave AI companies the right to build the future? AI companies say we have a choice. They already made theirs. Oppenheimer, who in the years after the war had become increasingly conflicted about atomic weapons, initially opposed work on the hydrogen or thermonuclear bomb, partially for moral reasons and partially because he was skeptical it would work. But he later changed his mind and supported work on it. The lawyers at the AEC wanted to know why. It wasn't because Oppenheimer had changed his mind about the morality of city-vaporizing thermonuclear bombs. Rather, it was because American physicists had struck upon a new design for hydrogen bombs that wasn't just workable, but positively elegant, or technically sweet, as he called it. For Oppenheimer, that was enough. As he told the AEC hearing, "When you see something that is technically sweet, you go ahead and do it, and you argue about what to do about it only after you have had your technical success." What Oppenheimer described was a kind of moral helplessness dressed up as resolve, the pull of a scientifically beautiful answer to an ugly problem, and the accompanying habit of holding the moral accounting until after the technical success. It is one of the most honest things anyone who built the bomb, or any other world-altering thing, has ever said. And it has never stopped being relevant, because the people now building the world-altering technology of our own moment keep saying versions of it too. You go ahead and do it. Jack Clark, the co-founder and head of policy at Anthropic, the company behind the Claude models, is one such person. So it was worth paying attention last week when Clark sat down for a long public dialogue with Samuel Kimbriel, the founding director of the Aspen Institute's Philosophy and Society, just 6 days after the federal government had abruptly cut off access to Anthropic's two most powerful models, ostensibly over fears of what they could do. Much of the conversation circled around a single idea that will be familiar to those who read Clark's work. Powerful AI is coming, and it presents us with a choice we are actively refusing to make by failing to regulate AI. Disclosure: Future Perfect is funded in part by the BMC Foundation, whose major funder was also an early investor in Anthropic. They don't have any editorial input into our content. We regulate toothbrushes, Clark pointed out, and cars, and nuclear weapons. But we seem to have this attitude towards technology that it's impossible to regulate, he said. It is not impossible to regulate. We sort of act as though, the technology industry is just inevitably going to do stuff, which I think is a choice. His sharpest example was the online platform shift that utterly reshaped the last 2 decades. Social media ran an uncontrolled experiment on the world, he said. We all now think and talk a bit differently because of social media. That was a choice. We can choose things to be different. This is the kind of talk that has long differentiated Anthropic from other major AI companies. Its principles are willing to linger on the serious risks of advanced AI, risks that demand clear and even strong regulation. About a week before the Aspen dialogue, and just a day before the Trump administration came down hard on Anthropic's latest models, CEO Dario Amodei published a blog post calling for government authority to legally block or even reverse the deployment of frontier AI models, failing safety tests on threats like cyber hacking and bioweapons. Anthropic acknowledges that advanced AI is an existential gamble, but argues it's a gamble we must take. At the Aspen dialogue, Clark spoke of a coming century that will be marked by brutal challenges, aging populations, straining institutions, a warming planet, that apparently can only be addressed with AI. To not go forward with artificial intelligence would be to rob ourselves of medical miracles we can only imagine, and implicitly condemn those who might otherwise be saved. Clark is right that there is a choice buried in all of this, but the question his framing elides is exactly whose choice it actually is. Who chooses? Sure, as Clark said, we regulate cars and toothbrushes and nuclear weapons, but in each case, someone built the thing first, and the rest of us were left to decide what to do about a world that already contained it. Nobody voted on whether the atomic bomb should exist. We were handed the consequences and had to write the rules later. Much the same is true of AI. The choice Clark wants the public to make around governing it only became necessary once his industry created the thing that needs governing. He is offering us a vote on what to do about AI, not a vote on whether it gets made, because that vote was already cast, in private, by him, a few hundred colleagues, and trillions of dollars. But why didn't we get a say? Why are we stuck in the world where, as in Oppenheimer's formulation, you argue about what to do about it only after you have had your technical success? I wasn't the only person in the audience who was wondering this. Near the end of the dialogue, a young woman put a sharper version of this question to Clark directly. Every frontier lab now admits the technology carries enormous risk, even existential risk, she noted. So my question is, what gives you, Anthropic, and the rest of the frontier labs the right to continue building something that could destroy everybody when none of us can actually opt out of it? Clark, to his credit, did not brush the question away, but neither did he answer it fully. He reframed it, away from the choice to build, toward the need for someone to take responsibility after it is built. That someone can't be the companies themselves, he said, describing an ideal future where outside compliance, regulatory, testing, and verification systems would decide when each lab was allowed to go further. Governments were already moving faster than anyone expected. The US and UK, he said, had built testing agencies whose tools were sometimes better than the company's own. It was a gracious answer, albeit one that sat awkwardly with the reality that President Trump now appears to be regulating AI by whim. But notice what it concedes. Asked what gives his company the right to build something that could destroy everybody, the head of policy at a leading AI lab did not say we have that right. He said the decision shouldn't rest with companies like his, only to describe a system to take it out of their hands that does not yet fully exist. He and his colleagues are still building, at the frontier, as fast as the science and the compute allows, while telling the room that someone else really ought to be in charge. AI is already loose in the world. The regulation of AI is still mostly the stuff of blog posts. So why are they really doing this? To bring it back to Oppenheimer, because AI is technically sweet. It's not the race with China, not the trillion-dollar valuations, not even the creditable desire to cure disease, though all of those are real. Underneath them is something simpler and much harder to govern. We are compelled to build what is beautiful. Clark all but said so, marveling that AI is easier and simpler to build than many other aspects of science, that his chief scientist jokes they'd have AGI already if they just fix the bugs in their code. We humans are a tool-using species, Clark argued, and AI is the ultimate tool. It's not that AI is inevitable, exactly, but that it is so weirdly simple to build once the foundations are set that almost any path you go down, AI appears. Technically sweet. What Clark described is the pull Oppenheimer named in 1954, the pull of an elegant solution that makes the question of whether you should build it feel beside the point. I can feel it myself, and I'm just a user. Put a capable model at your fingertips, ask it to do something you couldn't do alone. Write the program, find the flaw, untangle the thing you'd been stuck on. Then watch it simply do what you requested, and you'll experience a small electric thrill that has nothing to do with aging populations or the future of democracy. That thrill runs in an unbroken line from the user at the keyboard up through the engineer who trained the model to the executive who shipped it. That's why I suspect Clark's regulation talk, however sincere, is downstream of a decision that was never really in doubt. Like Oppenheimer with the hydrogen bomb, the people building this technology feel they have no choice but to go ahead, and then to hope the rest of us make the right choices to govern what they could not stop themselves from making. We have been lucky so far with the last technically sweet device that could still end the world. The hydrogen bomb has existed for 70 years without being used in anger, not because we solved the politics Oppenheimer warned about, but because the wiser choice won, and because we were lucky. Clark may be right that the choice is still ours. The bomb did not decide the Cold War. People did, and people can decide this too. But it would help if the people handing us that choice slowed down long enough to let us make it, instead of building as fast as they can and trusting our luck and theirs to hold. A version of this story originally appeared in the Future Perfect newsletter. Sign up here. Most popular. The Supreme Court is about to decide if children still have free speech rights. Take a mental break with the newest Vox crossword. Justine Sacco, the PR exec who was fired from IAC for her tweets, has landed back at IAC's match group. Zohran Mamdani just became a congressional kingmaker. The fall of Britain's prime minister is a warning for America.
Patience defines the hunt for the neutrino, where decades pass in a mountain tunnel to catch a ghost particle. It's a pursuit that asks only for curiosity. AI development moves with a different gravity, trading that silence for a speed that outpaces any chance for consent. Both fields chase the elegance of a technical fix, yet only one forces the world to live inside the experiment. If the thrill of discovery feels the same to the person at the whiteboard, how can anyone tell when the beauty of the math has become a mask for the risk?